Pokémon Champions is a success. It's allowing many more people compared to the past to start playing competitive Pokémon. And all because it's a free app on Nintendo Switch or mobile. And one of the reasons of the success is the return of one of the most beloved Pokémon mechanics, Mega Evolution, that is centralizing the meta. However, this is a problem. This is causing a big problem because some Mega Evolutions are created more Mega than others, and those Mega Evolutions tend to be very centralizing, and people are starting to get annoyed by said Mega Evolutions for different reasons. First, we have Charizard, the golden boy of Game Freak, being so consistently powerful and now receiving more buffs through new teammates, is dominating the meta even in teams that are not supposed to have Charizard, like Charizard in the rainbow. The second one is Mega Floette, a Pokemon so powerful people call it a second Xerneas, which is one of the most powerful Pokemon of all time. Unfortunately, it's locked behind a $70 paywall. And then we have a couple of other Mega Evolutions that are taking the meta by the storm. One of them can be Mega Swampert Under the Rain, or we can have Mega Metagross, and so on and so on and so on. But there's one Pokemon that can defeat all of these Pokemon. This Pokemon is Mawile. Now, at this point, I am pretty much known to be one of Mawile's strongest soldiers, for a variety of reasons. He is my favorite Pokemon, Base and Mega, but I'm not talking about Mawile solely because it's just my favorite Pokemon, but mostly because I truly believe that this Pokemon has chances to turn the meta around and be the solution that will solve Pokémon Champions metagame. Let's break it down. So, why am I suggesting Mawile? At first look, Mawile seems like a very less than mediocre Pokemon, at least at its base form. The stats aren't that great. Unfortunately, this is the curse of a Pokemon coming out in the 3rd gen in Ruby and Sapphire. And for most of its existence, didn't really achieve much. Not achieved much in VGC because of the Soul Steel typing, which in general is usually very good, but with those stats, it's not something you could be easily using around. In singles instead, the typical usage was the Substitute, Intimidate, Swords Dance, Baton Pass setter, which could be nice, but overall it was just a very small niche and other Pokemon could just feel it better. However, with the introduction of Fairy type and Mega Evolutions, things were about to change. With Mega Evolution, Mawile obtained a very nice buff to its stats. However, you may say, these stats are not that great. Yes, the attack is a bit higher, the defense, the physical defense is pretty good, okay, it's not a bad number by any means, like, both of the stats are not bad, it's respectively attack and defense 105, 125, and the special defense isn't too bad, it's 95. However, then you look at the HP and speed stat, both at 50. You will say this Pokemon is a wasted Mega Evolution. This is until we bring out the thing that this Pokemon has to complete these stats. The ability Huge Power. Huge Power will double the attack of the Pokemon having it. This means that at the end of the stats calculation on the field, if you train this Pokemon with Brave Nature and 32 points in attack, this Pokemon's attack stat will be 344. It's insane. And if you wanna show huge power, consider subscribing and follow me on the Purple platform, where we play games among the other things. We play Pokemon, we play Minecraft, we play Terraria, we play Stardew Valley, huge variety, huge gaming hours. It's an enormous stat for a Pokemon. It's higher than any legendary Pokemon ever. This is the secret to Mawile's huge power. And completes the stats, because 95 special defense points are pretty good when put in the right conditions. 125 defense is very good. And despite the 50 defense, the 50 HP, if you max out said HP, the final stats, the final bulk is not too shabby typically, okay? It will still resist a couple of very super powerful hits. Not all of them. You will have to compensate with the rest of your team for example, a Weather Ball from Mega Charizard Y, but overall it will manage to resist surprising hits. What about the speed? Well, the speed is the other secret to Mawile's power. The Pokemon I mentioned that were taking the meta by the storm, Charizard, Floette, Metagross, and many more, have all one thing in common. They all have a base speed stat of 100 or more. This means that they will outspeed most Pokemon in neutral conditions, and they will often have a Tailwind setter, a Tailwind support, or any kind of speed control in their favor, Thunder Wave, Scary Face, or even Icy Wind or Electro Web, in order to keep up with potential speed control on the opposing side. At that point, the game becomes a very harsh fight on who sets the best Tailwind, on who uses the best speed control move. Mawile, by nature, is a Pokemon that is going to require one move that will defeat the purpose of all the speed control moves I mentioned. Trick Room. Trick Room, for those of you that don't know, is a move, negative priority. It means that we'll always attack last, will always activate last, making the Pokemon using it attack the last of the turn, will reverse the speed order, making it so that a Pokemon with 100 speed will attack after a Pokemon with 50 speed, making it so that your speed becomes an advantage. Your very slow speed, the thing that presumably should have kept you down, it's going to become a force to be reckoned with. It's going to be very difficult for the opponent to match up against such speed when materially under the Trick Room they are 2 times slower than Mawile. How do you achieve that? Well, of course, the best Trick Room setter right now is Farigiraf. Farigiraf is a very recent Pokemon, but is a new and improved buff to Mawile, because it's so solid, it's so strong, it's so difficult to take down in one hit. People usually have to commit Hyper Beam on Sylveon or Light of Ruin, sacrificing a good chunk of the HP of the Pokemon using it, or in the case of Hyper Beam, having that Pokemon stay still for one turn. Unless they commit that, it's going to be very difficult. There's other techs like Roar or Imprison or Predict and Reverse the Trick Room, but are all ways you can prevent by using other team members. In the case of Roar, you can use Throat Chop on Incineroar. In the case of Hyper Beam of Light of Ruin, you can just fake out the threat. In the case of Imprison Trick Room, well, you can just play differently. You can just have a second plan. You can just even use your Incineroar or whatever you are using to take out the Imprison or the other Trick Room setter before you think of setting up Trick Room. Or you can just predict and flex the fact that you predicted that they were going to click Trick Room. But why Mawile specifically, you may ask? What is so special about this Pokemon that a Pokemon like Crabominable, for example, cannot do? It's even weak to Intimidate, it's a physical attacker, right? Wrong! Not only huge power, to be completely taken out of order, will need 2 Intimidates to permanently nerf Mawile to its non-huge power base stat. But Mawile, as its base ability, has the ability Hypercutter. I mentioned before that Intimidate was the preferable choice in the past, but with some changes that Pokémon Champions brought to the switching mechanics, Intimidate is less powerful against Pokémon with Hypercutter, and this is the case with Mawile. It means that the opponent may switch in an Incineroar or an Intimidate user before you Mega Evolve. Hypercutter is gonna trigger, blocking the Intimidate, and then you can just Mega Evolve safely and strike at full power. Not only that, one of the moves that Mawile can learn is Swords Dance. I used it in my last team that you can find around here, and I dropped Protect for Swords Dance in order to add additional pressure. Of course, it's not the only way. Another way that you can find is, for example, Joseph Ugarte got asked to make an official team for the Pokémon Company and run Protect, but it had Helping Hand on Farigiraf. So, the status move is already a very big deal with Mawile. Depending on your team or depending on the meta, you can choose between these two very powerful options. Protect, of course, is the general, very powerful option on any Pokémon, or should I say most Pokémon. And Swords Dance may add extra pressure to click something when the opposing Pokémon are going to possibly double Protect, in order to have extra pressure with your moves. And the other option is running Helping Hand on Farigiraf, which is an amazing support Pokémon for this Mawile. Mostly because it will also stop, thanks to Armor Tail, fake outs, so you can just continue attacking with no issue without worrying about fake out. What does Mawile do by itself other than clicking Swords Dance, clicking Protect, and looking extremely awesome? Well, Mawile's move pool is very good. The first thing we gotta mention is the move Play Rough. This is going to be your most powerful stab for this meta. This move is able to one-shot most meta threats that are around currently. One-shots Sylveon, one-shots Floette. Fun fact, Floette's Fairy Aura will boost your Play Rough, meaning that Floette Mega Evolving in front of Mawile is a minus, is a disadvantage for the Floette player, not for you, because you are going to use Fairy Aura to take them down. It's amazing. You are going to one-shot Garchomp, which is one of the most powerful Pokémon around, and you are going to hit for neutral, for very huge neutral damage, the wide majority of the meta. King Gambit takes like around 90%, Incineroar takes around 80%, and so on and so on and so on. It's a very good stab. Unfortunately, it's kinda volatile due to the 90% accuracy, but when it hits hard. So Play Rough is kinda a must on Mawile's set. Next up, you may expect me to talk about the other stab move that Mawile has in Iron Head. Of course, Iron Head is a very powerful move. It's so powerful, Pokémon such as Mega Metagross, one of the best Pokémon currently available, is not going to give it up so easily. Mawile is so good, it can just give up Iron Head. The reason is very simple. Whatever you wanna hit with Iron Head is also going to be taken out with Play Rough or any other move in Mawile's set. And the reason is, you wanna use a Steel type move to hit specific threats. You may wanna hit a Fairy type, but the Fairy types I mentioned are very few and are taken out by just clicking Play Rough. So you don't need Iron Head. We don't have yet very powerful and very bulky Steel types such as Xerneas or a Tapu, for example. So Play Rough is going to win over Iron Head. What about rock types? Well, most rock types are either very frail in the case of Lyca Rock, because yes, Lyca Rock can be used sometimes as a Charizard answer, or they are named Titar. Whether Titar is Mega Evolved or not, it's still a Dark type, meaning that it's weak to Fairy. So you can just click Play Rough against Titar. So as you can see, Play Rough becomes a very powerful move against basically the wide majority of the meta. It one-shots Swampert, it one-shots Dragonite, it one-shots Pelipper, it one-shots basically most of the meta. And the remaining meta that doesn't get one-shotted, well, this is a doubles game. You have two Pokemon on the field. It's very rare that the Pokemon surviving at 10% is going to live the next turn to tell the tale. Let's just say that. What about the rest of the moves? Because Mawile, yeah, seems very nice, seems very good. It all seems so nice. This power is amazing. Then you realize that Charizard exists. Mawile, it's not going to survive any Fire-type attack from Charizard. Whether it's called Heat Wave, whether it's called Flamethrower, whether it's called Weather Ball, Mega Charizard Y under the sun will melt Mawile in one hit, even if it's under the Trick Room. I mean, Play Rough is not very effective against fire types. Iron Head, even if you were to play Iron Head, is not super effective against fire types. What are you going to click against Charizard? Well, introducing Rock Slide. Yes, this Pokemon has rock moves. Now, Rock Slide is the most generic one because it also allows you to ignore potential redirection in Follow Me and Rage Powder. It also learns Rock Tomb. Now, Rock Tomb can be nice, but since you're under the Trick Room, and being that Rock Tomb will lower the speed of your opponent and is also weak to Follow Me and Rage Powder, it's usually less usable. So we opt for Rock Slide. Now, there's no Charizard that will resist a Rock Slide by Mawile at +0. There may be some Charizards that will resist Rock Slide at -1. And here is where your Farigiraf support comes in with either Helping Hand or Thunderbolt to finish off the Charizard, or the rest of the team in general to help support Mawile, either taking out the remaining of Charizard or taking out the potential Intimidate, typically another Incineroar or Scrafty, I guess. So Rock Slide is the move of choice over Iron Head. Most Fire-type attackers are going to be a massive weakness for this Pokemon. This means that Torkoal, Charizard, Incineroar are going to be very problematic, and as I mentioned, Incineroar doesn't go down after one play half. So at this point, may as well try and roll for a flinch, or one-shot Charizard, or lower the power of Eruption so much that Torkoal probably won't even remember what an Eruption is. So Rock Slide is so powerful, you can even click it outside of Fire-type threats. It's so powerful, its both opponents will deal so much damage, even if the opponent is a Sinistra that will take neutral damage, or a Milotic, or anything really that doesn't resist Rock Slide. It's going to take so much damage, it's basically going to become a shadow of its former self. Like, it's going to be at minimum like, what, at 70% damage on most Pokemon? Some Pokemon are even 80, 90, like it's such a powerful tool, and since you're under Trick Room, you are typically going to move first with Mawile, meaning that you can even roll a flinch, which is the most powerful thing that Rock Slide typically has, even outside the massive damage that Mawile dishes out. And it's kinda becoming one of the memes from Pokemon. It already was, but it's now getting popularized thanks to the popularity of Pokemon Champions. Rockslide flinches! What about the last move? Because yes, it's all fun and games, it's all fun and playhouse, it's all fun and Rockslides. What about if the opponent somehow manages to stall through all that damage and stall out all of your turn of Trick Rooms? That's an issue. Yes, the opponent's Pokemon may be at very low HP. Like, some Pokemon may be half HP, some Pokemon may be lower than half HP. But now they have the speed advantage. What are you going to do against a Charizard that, yes, it's at 30% HP remaining, but it's outside of the Trick Room, faster than you have Mawile on the field, without Trick Room, ready to be one-shotted by one Weather Ball? What are you going to do against that? Well, introducing the priority move, Sucker Punch. Now, Sucker Punch is a very interesting move. It only attacks if the target of the move is attacking itself. Meaning that Protect, Swords Dance, a Switch, or your attacks get redirected with a Follow Me or a Rage Powder. In those cases, Sucker Punch is not going to work. However, the uses of Sucker Punch in these cases are exactly that. We mentioned the 30% HP Charizard ready to throw a Weather Ball to your Mawile and ultimately win the game again, solidifying the fact that Charizard is so good, everything you do is worthless because they're always going to win and they're always going to be the top meta. You just click Sucker Punch on their Weather Ball and the Charizard magically disappears. And suddenly, oh no! The opponent doesn't have fire types anymore, and you have a Mawile that doesn't go down that easily to the rest of the remaining Pokemon. What is Venusaur going to do? Gamble the sleep powders? Yes. How much is that going to last? Because you only have Sludge Bomb and a Grass type move. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you have a Fire Giraffe with a Psychic type attack ready to strike. Oh, what are you going to do? Well, nothing. Then the Mawile player just won by clicking Sucker Punch. Now, Sucker Punch doesn't only have an use for that. It's only very useful against one of the most famous Mega Evolutions currently available, Metagross. Metagross being a Psychic type means that it's going to take 70% from a neutral Sucker Punch. 70%! And is typically going to take more damage with the rest of your team. Because Metagross is a top threat. You know, Metagross being a Steel type, it means that it will resist Rock Slide, it will resist Ironhead, it will resist Playhalf. Then, you just need to have something. Well, Sucker Punch. Fun fact, being that both Sucker Punch and Bullet Punch have the same priority, even if you don't have Farigiraf on the field stopping Bullet Punch, but you are under the Trick Room, the speed of the priorities is also weird. Typically, if a Pokemon has slower speed stat compared to another one, and they both use the same priority level of a move, the Pokemon with the higher speed stat is going to attack first, despite both of them using the same priority move. Okay, two Mega Metagross with the same move, Bullet Punch with the same base stat. If one of the two Metagrosses is faster, the faster Metagross is going to use Bullet Punch first. In the case of Trick Room, being that Mawile is faster than Metagross under Trick Room, even if the usually faster but slower under Trick Room Metagross is going to click Bullet Punch, your Sucker Punch will attack first. Despite having the same priority, being that under the Trick Room Mawile is faster, Sucker Punch is going to attack first. And that is going to heavily damage, if not KO, one of the best Pokemon currently available. It's nuts, you may say. Is that all there is? Because yes, we talked about how personally, in a vacuum, Mawile is great, seems great. What do you do with it though? Well, of course, Mawile has a variety of teams it can fit. As long as you can fit a semi-trick room mode, being that composed of Farigiraf or Incineroar, if you have that, personally I think there's no excuse to also fit a Mawile mode. The reason is sad. Art Trick Room is very strong. However, most people will agree that even the hardest of Trick Room teams will need a fast lead. Now, my last team will feature a very fast Chlorophyll Venusaur, thanks to that slow Torkoal, so that it works as a joint point between a fast and slow team, which will also mess up with the team preview at the start of a match for the opponent. Other theories suggest a straight-up secondary fast Mega Evolution. Historically, the other Mega Evolution was typically a Mega Rayquaza or a Mega Salamence, or even, if especially most recently due to the lack of Mega Salamence, there's Mega Charizard. So you can fit Mawile basically either on teams intended to have a Trick Room mode and a fast mode, or fast teams, fast Sun teams for example, with a Trick Room mode, in order to have much more flexibility. This is all because this all adds to the strength of Mawile, because even if it's kinda unorthodox compared to the typical meta threats, at this point everybody knows how strong this Pokémon can be if left unchecked. The sheer pressure of seeing Mawile in team preview may scramble a bit the decisions of the opposing trainer. Same thing goes though for the other Mega Evolution, typically a Charizard in this meta, historically a Salamence or a Rayquaza. Those Pokémon are also very powerful. This means that your opponent is going to be forced to make a choice. A. Either plan for both and make a suboptimal lead compared to their usual lead for the rest of the meta, or B. Try to gamble the 50-50 and hope to get the lead right, predicting that you are either going to set up Trick Room or have a fast mode. And that's where your team building skills come in. Because you, as the Mawile player, are going to predict that. And you're going to, of course, prepare leads to counter any possibility in the most optimal way. If you think your opponent is going to try and counter Charizard, and you, oh no, you brought Charizard, they are ready to counter it, well, fear not. If you team build correctly, your opponent is not going to be very happy with how the match is going. For example, you may use a Garchomp to tank a Rock Slide. You may use a Torkoal as a secondary Sunsetter. You may use a Politoed in order to tank some hits and have this kind of double primal thing. If you have a lead that will set up Mawile and the opponent has brought up a counter to that, oh no, what are you going to do? Well, you are going to have Incineroar, you are going to have any kind of disruption. You can have a Sleep, you can have your Venusaur for example, you can have a Follow Me, you can have a Rage Powder, you can have a bunch of options. You can even have one of your heavy damage Pokemon. One of the first Art Trick Room teams of Pokémon Champions featured a very strong Gallade, for example, ready to take out most threats while your Trick Room setter is preparing Trick Room, or to take out one of the potential threats that a Mawile may face. All comes down to team building, and Mawile offers the final slot to counter most of the meta when your typical answers don't work. You can bring Charizard, the rest of the meta is very fast, you have a Mawile. Trick Room is very popular, especially because right now most Trick Room strategies either rely on Mawile or are suboptimal for a variety of reasons. And you, as the Trick Room user, are going to know how a Trick Room works, therefore making it much harder for your opponent to set it up. Because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to let you understand, the Mawile player is always going to be in control. Because no matter what, your opponent has to plan for that little menace. And I think that this Pokemon, for all the reasons I mentioned, amazing coverage, amazing team flexibility, you can literally fit this Pokemon, as I said, in most teams as long as you have the correct partner options. Can defeat all the meta threats that you may want to defeat. Defeats Charizard, defeats Floette, defeats Garchomp, defeats Swampert, defeats Metagross. It defeats all of them. And if your team manages to have a slot to include a Mawile strategy, a Mawile mode on your team, and you suffer from any of those threats, Mawile is the perfect solution. And I think Mawile is going to do very well at this year's World Championships. Mark my words. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I really hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments what you think about what I said about Mawile. You can find all the teams I made in the description, linked everywhere. And as always, see you next time.